Harry Kane is joining Bayern Munich. He's finally leaving Tottenham. What a disaster for Spurs. Or is it? And how does Spurs replace Harry Kane? Well, to answer that question, I'm joined by Jon Mackenzie. Don't you and don't believe me, John.
I won't.
Yes. Well, the first question, John, is how do Tottenham replace the centre forward, Harry Kane?
Well, there's an argument to be made that they don't need to do that because they have Richarlison, who has been playing as a number 9 for them this pre-season, and he's been doing a pretty good job of it. So there's an argument to be made that that doesn't actually need to be the case.
And you're making the argument. Now, may I raise to you that Harry Kane is perhaps a better centre forward than Richarlison? So why would they not be worried that they're missing that quality of a player?
Well, Harry Kane is obviously better than Richarlison for a number of different reasons, but I guess the way that I would think about this is how you distinguish between the intrinsic talent of a player and then the system that they are playing in. And I think obviously, when it comes to intrinsic talent, Kane is streets ahead of Richarlison, but when it comes to the system, I think Richarlison fits that better.
John, please tell me why Richarlison's style or profile of play is better than what Kane was doing or different to what Kane was doing.
So what I would say is that Ange Postecoglou's system is all based around getting the ball into this dangerous area in the penalty spot. And so what you want from your number 9 is to be in that spot. Now, the way that they are going to get the ball into this area is by building up at the back and actually progressing often in these wide areas here. So they want to move the ball in these wide areas and eventually get the ball either through cutbacks or through crosses into this space. So you need to have a number 9 who is going to sit in that sort of space.
But doesn't Kane already, he can do that. He's a centre forward, he scores goals.
Yeah, no, Kane can play as an out-and-out striker, but I think the problem is that when you play a number 9 for Postecoglou, so much of what you're doing is off the ball, and Kane likes to be involved on the ball. So he likes to drop in, help out, be involved in play, and he has the ability to play as a really elite number 10 as well. Whereas with Richarlison, I think he offers a couple of things that Kane doesn't. The first thing is that in terms of running in behind, someone like Richarlison, I think, is going to be offering a little bit more than Kane. Postecoglou wants his centre forward to be able to just get in on the end of balls from wide areas, from crosses in as well. And Richarlison is going to be able to find that space in behind, I think, much better than Harry Kane. But there's also another aspect, which I like to call pinning. Now, when I talk about pinning, what I'm talking about is the impact that the number 9 has on the players around them. So Richarlison is going to be sitting in between the centre-backs here. If he's running into the box, for example, what he's going to be doing is dragging the centre-backs with him, and this is going to be creating space in behind that other players can attack. So when you've got someone like Maddison, you've got Sarr here as well. We've got Kulusevski who's going to come inside. If you're generating space for all of these attacking players with the back line pulled in, you're just going to be able to generate chances a lot more as well. So I think the difference between Richarlison and Kane is that Richarlison is going to be much happier doing a lot of this work, which is off the ball. He's going to be able to offer these situations where he's running in behind. He's going to pin centre-backs and open up this space, whereas Kane is going to want to drop deep, and he's not going to make the centre-backs work as hard.
And the other thing as well is that they also have Heung-min Son, who can play through the centre as a backup striker. Dane Scarlett scored against Shakhtar in pre-season, which is obviously a stunning way to predict someone's going to be great. And there's also this new guy they brought in called Alejo Veliz, who I've watched a bit of, and he looks like a proper player. He's only 19, 6'1", big strong lad, can play at the top, a bit more like Richarlison than Kane in profile, I would say. So he's a lot closer to what Postecoglou would probably want to have. Again, very young, so we can learn from Richarlison over a year and might get more out of him after that way. So if they have the centre forward position covered, they don't need to really spend that money on a replacement. That's just not needed. So where might they be better off spending the money, Jon Mackenzie?
Well, I think that the big areas where Spurs can really improve most is in these wide forward areas and wingers.
I agree.
Yes. So we've got Kulusevski and Son.
And they're both very good players.
Both very good players. As we've said, a lot of the chances that Spurs are going to try and create are going to be from these wide areas, getting the ball into the box. So what you're wanting to have is players who can get into situations where they're able to play these balls into the box, which then Richarlison can finish. Now, as we've said, Kulusevski, Son, very good players, but one of the real upsides that you can get from these sorts of positions, because you've got classic wingers in these situations, is the ability to go either way around your fullback. So if you can go down the line or if you can cut inside, it creates a huge amount of indecision for that fullback, makes it harder for them to be able to defend. And if you can get through past the fullback in these situations, it's just going to add a huge amount of upside to an Ange Postecoglou system. And I have questions about whether or not Kulusevski and Son are actually going to be the best kind of profile of player in those situations.
Well, that's the thing, because we know they mostly come inside to shoot. Like they can go outside, but not really. The other thing that's key with Postecoglou is he doesn't really often have the overlapping fullback. They tend tend to be playing inside the pitch to help with ball progression, but also to help against the counter-attack if they're in this position to stop the ball getting away. You've got Maddison in here, maybe Sarr will be here. Sarr comes out wide quite a lot actually in pre-season. These guys need to stay wide for a lot of reasons, for the positional play, to help with play progression when they're building up, because they tend to be wide from here as well. And that's where we get Son and Kulusevski are not likely to go in or out, they're likely to go in. And so then the most sensible place to spend the money is surely on one of these big expensive wingers. Who should they sign? Well, here are some of the players that we think they should be looking at. These are the kinds of ones that would be realistic or sensible, if you will, they could kind of sign. So these players are wingers who can go inside or outside, but obviously the flexibility are within a reasonable price range, right? So Nico Williams, mostly on the right.
But the ability to go on the other side as well, which I think that flexibility is important as well, because you're going to sometimes want to target weaker fullbacks. So if you can get your stronger player to play on either side, then you have a little bit of tactical flexibility to switch things up.
Kings of Coman, same thing, right? You see, the green doesn't really matter. They're just all wingers, basically, is what we're looking at. Doku, more of an inside forward, probably, but really great dribbler. Defenders have no idea which way he's going. That would absolutely work with the way that pins the defence back, brings it back in the wide areas to give Richarlison room in the middle, and Maddison scores. Then you've got Mitoma at Brighton.
I mean, he's the one they should lump on, right? You know exactly what you're getting with Mitoma. He's one of the best dribblers in the world, and he would just tear it up for Spurs, I think.
But of course, Mitoma would be very, very, very expensive. We know that Brighton are quite good at getting money for their players also. So here's another expensive option. Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, love watching this guy. Very, very much on the left. But when he's on the left, you don't know whether he's going to go further left or right. He can go either way, which is very important. But he would cost like £100 million plus massive wages. It's unrealistic they'd really be able to get him. And this brings us on to our next point, because if you have a load of money to spend, like say you sold a superstar player like, I'll pick one at random, Gareth Bale, and then you were to sell that player for lots of money, you'd be inclined to want to spend that on lots of different players. But there's no examples of that not working in the past, so we can't possibly build on that. And if we look at where Spurs are in the league, above them, I mean, you've got Arsenal, Man City, United, Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea. Yeah, so that's 6 teams really fighting for the 4 places. I would say Spurs are probably outside that just now. I don't think that's harsh. So they're pretty much where Brighton also are at the moment. So would they not be better off holding the money, or what should they do, John?
Well, I think people mention the Gareth Bale situation a lot because they spent a lot of money and spread it around, and none of those players really looked that great as a result of it. But I think the difference between what's happening now versus what was happening back then is that you now have a system coach who looks for very specific profiles of players, and there's a very much one-to-one mapping in bringing in a better player in a position, therefore raising the ability of the team to do well. So I think in this situation, not only is it the case that there's a number of spaces in the Spurs squad which they need to upgrade on, or even just find players of a profile that will work, there's also very obvious areas where you can improve. So I think in this situation, my hunch would be they should be very careful to make sure they're bringing in the sorts of players who are going to raise the profile of this squad. So we've talked about the wingers. The wingers are basically designed to get the ball past opposition lines of pressure, into these wide areas, into the box. If you can get players who are better at doing that, the system is going to improve as a result of it. We talked about why Richarlison works so well, because he works in the system to the extent that you can even sell someone like Harry Kane and still be fairly confident that it's going to work. So I think you have to extend that logic all the way through and say, well, where are the other areas where we can improve that is going to make the system just stand out even better? We
look at the table, to put this into context further, like we know all those teams are ahead of them. This is where we're currently at, is 8th position. They're not in any European competition. This is the season they could use to build. There's no point rushing it. It's unlikely they'll get in that position, so don't chase it. You just wait and patiently build like teams in the past have done. That's how you get there. That's surely what the thing is. And so that brings us to our third question, John. The third question is, if you were trapped in a van with a cloned version of yourself, and exactly the same as you.
This is the first time I'm meeting myself.
Yeah, you've never met before, and you're trapped in the van, and you've got to fight to the death, right? Do you think the clone would be able to predict the moves that you make on it? Like in the movies?
Because this is like a nature-nurture debate, isn't it?
Well, I don't know, because you know in the movies when you try and hit a punch, they instantly block because they know. Do you think that's realistic?
Is this because you're saying that I have some kind of telepathic involvement with my clone, or are you saying that
it's because it's exactly the same as you now? It's cloned exactly now, and now you're split, and now you're 2.
But you think my clone just has the ability to be like, well, this is what I would do, so he would probably do it?
Or would they think about it, or would they naturally respond to it?
I think my clone would probably beat me, to be honest. I think he would take me out.
And on that note, is Harry Kane leaving a disaster for Tottenham?
I don't think so, because of all the things we've talked about in terms of the system. On the one hand, obviously Harry Kane is an asset that any team wouldn't want to lose. But at the same time, if you're balancing off bringing in a system coach with losing a player who is going to give you upside regardless of the system, then I think it probably works out in the wash in the end.
And there you have it. It doesn't really matter that Spurs have sold Harry Kane or are selling him. Whichever has happened, that's Harry Kane.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.